guys, welcome to Career22, a series of videos about the skills we need for a career in the 22nd century. My name is Miguel.
And I am Milton.
And we are both founders of Ungap Education and also both university professors. And after several years teaching, what we've learned is that when we were helping our students to kickstart their careers, we realized that this is one of the most critical and stressful moments in their lives. And that's why we also decided to bring you a couple of learnings we've collected through the years about how to start your career in these short videos. And we have a topic for today, and the topic is, Milton?
We're going to talk about commitment and sticking to your choices. And the reason why we want to talk about it is because as much as we value your ability to explore, to try new things, and to open your horizons, what we also observe is that people that are successful in their lives and in their careers also have an ability to commit and to make clear choices and to go all the way. Of course, that doesn't say that you lose sight and you lose perspective. There will be moments where you have to learn how to change course. But what we see is that people that are successful in their careers have a clear sense of commitment and also a clear sense of what they want to achieve when they make a choice. And that's critical for you to be able to persevere in times of difficulties and not to give up halfway through the journey. So we think it's very important that you also create a clear sense of commitment to the choices you make, and that you are clear about what you're trying to achieve once you've set on a specific course of action. So that's why we think commitment is as important as it is for you to be able to explore and try out new things.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like the entrepreneurship world, right? We're always doing this parallel reality. But entrepreneurs, of course, they have to experiment a lot and search for their business model. But once they actually find it, it's also good to see entrepreneurs focusing and committing to really deliver that value to the table, because otherwise, you are always starting stuff, and sometimes it's good for you to stop starting and start finishing. I think this is one of the key learnings that we had. Yeah, and do you think this pledge for dedication, is kind of for life, or how do you see this ending?
Now, I see that in my view and from our experience, from my experience as well, and from what we see out there in various studies, is also your ability to think in terms of cycles of, say, 3 to 5 years, where you're able to, on one hand, immerse yourself long enough to really understand your new job or new function, new organization, and at the same time have sufficient time for you to deliver and to have an impact. So your commitment is not like you're going to stay on that same career for forever. It's more like, okay, in the medium term, I've made this choice. What is it that I would like to get in 3 to 5 years? I mean, anything below that will be hard. I mean, the first year you'll be just, learning the ropes and getting a sense of what's happening. The second year you start getting a hold of the networks and the informal relationships of power and the skills that they need to develop. Only after the third year you can actually start delivering. So you need to build up some resilience and some patience there for you to hold on so that you can deliver. And don't forget, at some point, as much as we promote being forward thinking and about possibilities, and of course that's critical, you start living a legacy, right? And if people look at your past, especially later in your life, and the only thing you did was job hopping, you lose some credibility in that as well. So you need to build up a strategy and a career path that, yes, is open towards what is possible, but also shows that you can commit, that you are reliable, that people can trust you, and that will add to your ability to grow in your career and to get increasingly more important and more responsible positions.
So how do you manage the trade-off between committing and closing the cycle versus sticking to things that are not actually making you grow?
Yeah.
So is it learning? Is it kind of the return on learning and the patterns? Whenever you see the patterns repeating itself, it's time perhaps to move on. Is that it?
I think it's a good point there, Miguel. I think this also goes back to this meta competence we've been talking about sometimes. This ability to reflect, to be present, and to understand when it's time to move on. And of course, the more you are aware of your principles, to be able to say no and to let go whenever situations are basically fundamentally against your set of principles, that will be important. The more you are in touch with the things you really like and you're passionate about, the more in touch you are with the purpose and the why of what you're doing, and the more you are aware of the things you want to develop. So that sort of metacognition about who you are, the more you are aware of that, the more you'll be able to feel and to sense when it's time to move on, right? You will notice if there's no energy and no passion anymore. You will notice if there's a clear violation of your principles. And it will be hard because it's, reality is messy and confusing. But when the more present you are and the more aware you are of who you are and what you care about, the more you'll be able to tell when the time has come to move on, right? And that's a very important skill, is that you commit, but you know when to take distance as well, and to depart into new possibilities.
So commitment is not doomed for life. It's more on actually pledging to deliver and and discipline yourself to close the cycles. Right, great. So can you give us some examples, or can we think about examples, practical examples on commitment as a good skill in career crafting?
I mean, I think the one you mentioned with the entrepreneurs, I think is a good overall example. We see that those entrepreneurs that are successful, and it's interesting because also investors also look into that, right? As much as you can be creative and need to be flexible somehow, you need also to show that you are trustworthy, that you go all the way, and that you don't give up at the first obstacle throughout your growth path. So I think successful entrepreneurs are a good example of that type of commitment we're talking about here, is that given difficulties and the obstacles you will face, you push through because you know where you're trying to head to, and you don't let others sort of stop you in that. And then from my personal experience and people I've met, and especially also within the corporate world, those who have reached the top in my network of relationships have invariably been able to commit to something more than just a year or two. Every now and then, as I was telling, they decide that it's time to leave because of some matter of ethical sort of challenges. But broadly speaking, they are very much aware of the loop and the cycle they need to finish. And they get into an organization and they feel like, okay, I have a mission here, and this is what I want to achieve in the next 3 years. And I've known cases of people who said, 3-4 years, I think it's enough for me to then move on. But then things change, a crisis comes in. And those who have been actually more successful were also those who at that time said, no, hold on, it's not time yet to leave. I have a commitment towards these people, towards this team. and I need to get us through this cycle here now, so that we can, and this bad time, so that we can come out better. And that sort of commitment where you're there for your people is also something that eventually people will value tremendously. Of course, it's not to say this is a guarantee for success, but in my experience, the anecdotal evidence that I can share is that, you know, those who have been eventually most successful were those that showed great signs of commitment towards their teams, towards their organizations, and they were very clear about what they wanted to achieve and wanted to close these cycles.
So interesting. So your example is not committing to a job, but it's committing to a team. It's committing to a project. It's committing to a mission. You know, yeah, a great one. So another example, and you were mentioning the entrepreneurs. I think it's a great one. You know, investors don't like entrepreneurs that actually you know, are not committed full-time and full-hearted to you know, a specific venture. And if you pick, you know, if you put yourself on a recruiter's shoes, you know, if you are seeing, you know, two candidates, and one is kind of the more opportunistic, job hopping, and you know, that will not commit, that is in there to take more than to give, versus another one which is much more you know, into giving, into committing, into deep diving. I'm quite sure that it's easy to know who to pick, right? So definitely commitment is one thing that recruiters and, you know, and everybody would, you know, would prefer to select, rather than you know, a more opportunistic approach. A good example of that, I have two friends that have, for me, what I would call commitment. You know, one of them is our former student as well, and the guy, you know, he is working for 20 years almost, or a little bit less, in the same company. So you'd say it's commitment because he's worked in, you know, the same company. And how is that possible? Probably stagnated. He's just, you know, is there? No, that's not right. So he's always in the same company with different challenges, different areas, and actually he's now, you know, off to, I think it's the 10th assignment within the same company. And it's a big company, it's an oil company, so he's always managing to, you know, to go here and there. And I have another good friend that actually changed jobs several times, but you know, he also shows a lot of commitment, because whenever he's entering a job, you know, he establishes a mission, clear mission with clear KPIs. And then he achieves the KPIs and he says, okay, my commitment here is ending. So now either I have another mission inside of the same company that actually is fulfilling to him, etc., or I change to another job. This guy is the CEO now of you know, of a European bank, and he was in the previously was in the UK in another bank, and previously he was in another one. So it's always kind of looking for missions, establishing KPIs, achieving that, and then moving on. So that's
I mean, one or two things that I'd like to add to that. I think the first point is interesting, because we tend to think that the successful executives are those who experiment with different companies, and but in fact we have evidence of the contrary. In fact, people who get to the top typically are people who commit to an organization for a longer period, and there's enough reasons for that. You know, you're able to build trust within the organization. You're able to understand how the organization functions deeply. You develop industry expertise. So the idea that you need to go and shop around throughout your career is actually as intuitive as it might sound in this time where everything is possible, is actually pretty much the opposite. So being able to commit towards an organization for the longer run, tends to pay back. Of course, again, it's not a guarantee, but that's something we see out there being very important. And the other one is, those who are successful have this sort of growth mindset we talked in other videos. It's more about, am I learning, right? Asking yourself that question, am I learning? Am I growing in doing what I do? Am I becoming better? Am I reaching, achieving new things? Am I having an impact? And that sort of mindset is often probably more important than just, am I getting my next job and my next title and what have you. So that mindset contaminates, and people trust you more, and people like you more, and people are willing to trust you more. And so if you become overly obsessed with the next promotion, that actually has a sort of a negative impact on your performance, because people might tend to look at you a bit as an opportunistic. Doesn't mean that you need to be naive about it, but the more committed and the more about impact and growth and learning you are, the more others will be able to trust you, and that will translate into greater chances of success in your career.
So great. So we have commitment as a key skill, in order to achieve what we call the 22nd century career. It's about throwing your hat into the ring and challenging yourself to stick to the battle that you have in front of you, versus throwing the towel and moving on to the next battlefield because you're somehow frustrated with the one that you have. So that's kind of the pledge for dedication and commitment that we are talking about. Great. So let's try to give a couple of hacks, tips on how to do it. What can we do in order to build up our commitment skill?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from my own experience in a way. I mean, if I look back to my own career path, right? I think I could have committed more often, and I think I've always felt very restless about finding what I want to do, and I think in a way that's a good thing, because it kind of led me into who I am today, into being in a place where I feel really comfortable and I feel really committed to this career. But looking back, I could have committed a bit more than what I did. And it's okay in the early stages of your career to fail more times and not to know. So in the first 10 years, probably you will have more hopping than what you would be expecting afterwards. But one thing that I think could have helped me, and that's a recommendation, is to have a mentor or someone you can refer to and talk to about where you stand in that phase in your life. A mentor can be your father or your mother, because sometimes they can work as our role models, but it could be a friend, or it could be someone in the industry or someone you respect, or a professor that you can refer to, that you can go and talk about and make sense of whether the time is right for you to leave or not. So I would say find mentors that you can work with to make sense of where you stand in your career, and help you, understand the extent to which you should move on or stay in the organization. For me, that would have helped if I would have had that mentor earlier in my career.
So mentor as someone that will make you accountable, right? So the commitment sticks.
Yeah, and someone older. In coaching, you don't have to be necessarily older, but in mentoring, you should definitely be older in a way, because having someone who has been through life and has suffered various battles, I think that would help. Having someone you can refer to, and their wisdom from the past, I think is something that you should tap into in order to reflect about your own life.
Yeah, great. So I also have a hack. I think public commitment helps you to draw the line. In order to commit more. So public commitment can be if you upload and you update your LinkedIn profile, that's great. But why don't you do a post in LinkedIn saying, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to achieve, or even blogging about it if you have a blog. I think it's also a good way. And typically, if you manage to say, this is my mission, this is the KPIs or the, you know, the objective that I want to, or the goals that I want to achieve, that will somehow make you think twice before just throwing the towel. So that's how, you know, how you can throw your
Yeah,
hat into the ring.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what about mistakes? You know, what type of mistakes or fuck ups do we see, you know, guys doing, and, you know, so in this commitment or lack of commitment?
What I see often is that people, especially among young people, sometimes I see them overly concerned about, you know, what's in it for me. And once you are in that mode, it's going to be harder to commit. So I would say, you know, think a bit less about yourself somehow. Uh, Not to think of less about yourself in the sense that you will lose confidence, but think less about yourself in terms of, you know, having too much of a taker attitude. We'll be talking about that in another video. But I think for commitment is that you, if you can develop a bit more empathy and a bit more caring and understanding about the organization, the people you're going to work with, about your impact, that will help. So don't be overly obsessed. And I think we referred to that before. Don't be overly obsessed about your next step. That will distort your judgment, and people will perceive that you are overly opportunistic in your career. So force yourself to think, okay, not about what's in it for me, but, you know, what do I bring to the table, right? That would be for
Yeah.
me very important.
Yeah, that's a major fuck up. Another one I see a lot of times is kind of this find your passion, uh, you know, speech, and this inspirational motivation, you know, crap about finding your passion. And then suddenly you forget that you know, in order to find your passion, probably you have to go through a lot, and sometimes people just you know, swipe too fast, a little bit like Tinder approach. So it's immediate swiping, 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 swiping until I really find my passion. And I think, you know, Tinder is not a good way to find passion. So swiping is not a good way to really find passion. So I always say it's a little bit like a good meal, you know, like when we were, you know, children, we don't like, children typically don't like eating broccoli, right? So they prefer the burger. So I always say, you know, we have to eat the burger, of course, because we love it. It's the passion part. But we also have to eat the broccoli because it's the, you know, it's what healthy, and it's what really will help you to advance. So in career crafting, you know, don't swipe too much, don't swipe too fast, because swiping is not the way in order to find passion. And start, you know, eating the broccoli besides the burger, you know, and forcing yourself to do that. But
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think
That's very important indeed. I mean, I guess that I understand what you're saying. There's a sort of uh, excessive expectations about you finding uh, your passion, and also too much emphasis on you being almost in this place of bliss where everything kind of falls from the sky because you are in the zone and doing what you love and all that. But doing what you love often requires a lot of efforts, and for you to be good at anything, you need, even if you have a special talent, those who are truly great and are truly good at what they do, you know, they spend a lot of times and a lot of hours practicing and doing things that maybe, you know, they wouldn't call as being, you know, passionate, but it's about that ability to commit and to practice and to train and to suffer also a bit. You know, there's a lot of pleasure in work and in life, But in order for us to get the ultimate reward in a way, in the sense that we are in a place of feeling that we contribute and that we've made an impact, you need to go through also a bit of pain as well sometimes. So I guess that's a part of the game.
Yeah. So we saw today commitment as a key competence, key skill to forge your career crafting process, and I think we've learned that it's not easy, but it's very important to commit to end the cycles, to close the learning loops and the development loops in your career in order to evolve towards your dream meaningful career. So Milton, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And see you in a while.
See you next time. All right. Take care.
Very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.